Namaste. Welcome to the Friends of Kriya Yoga, to my heart. I appreciate everybody who's come today, and I really, really appreciate that this effort's just continuing due to the compassion and the dedication all you have. I don't have words there. But for the talk today, what covers the yamas and niyamas. Uh, Again, one of the eightfold of yoga. I'd like to approach it uh, the from the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga, as well as certain other sources. More importantly, just some insights I've had along, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Well, anyway, as you know, at least from the audience I'm seeing here, Kriya Yoga is the science of balance of energies, referred to as prana. It's the primal force of the universe, which interacts in the mind and body to make us aware of the spiritual nature of existence. When the spiritual nature is realized, all parts of our being are brought into balance and brings a harmonious joy of love and wisdom in life. There's 8 essential limbs to the study and practice of yoga. Abstinences, yama; observances, niyama; postures, asanas; pranayama, or control of the energy; sense withdrawal, pratyahara; concentration, dharana; and meditation, dhyana; and finally contemplation, samadhi. The first 4 stages of yoga are meant to the mental and physical body of phlegm with yama and niyama cleanses the subtle astral channels, while the pranayama and the asana tends to cleanse the physical astral channels. There are 5 yamas and niyamas. The first of the 8 stages is to refrain from injury, lying, stealing, sensuality, and greed. They're listed in their positive psychological aspects. Nonviolence, ahimsa; truthfulness, or satya; non-stealing, astarya; celibacy, brahmacharya; and non-greed, I'm always have a challenge with this, aparigraha. If a person's lying, stealing, injuring, it's stealing his or her life force in connection with a larger life force is scattered. It's through the discipline of these absences one gathers the life force as if in a magnifying glass to kindle the spiritual fire or kundalini. Each absences and observances are divided into 3 groups. That's mental, verbal, and physical. Let's start with the yamas, with nonviolence. It's considered the number 1 of all of the 10 observances, because if you're violent or have a lack of being a part of life, not apart from it, it pretty much torpedoes everything else. Main source of violence is within our intellects. The practice of nonviolence brings good karma, draws into your life nonviolent people and events. It brings about a calm mind, and then concentration and meditation is possible, and only with meditation is illumination possible. The more you realize everything is spirit, the more fully you become established in nonviolence. Fear creates violence. Instinctual fear is for survival. The sutras mention that part of yoga is dispelling unnecessary fear. The fear of the unfamiliar can appear similar, but is created by one of the 2 powers of the mind, and that's the imagination, or what if. It creates fear out of, again, thinking in the future as if only, feeds regret with the delusion of faulty memory. Courage isn't the absence, by the way, of fear. It's just simply the ability to be afraid without being paralyzed. This brings powerlessness, or feeling of running out of choices, which, as Kriyananda taught us, just simply thinking a thought you haven't before is vital. Powerlessness can be negated by practicing gratitude, trust in the present moment, as well as thinking of others. Again, as Kriyananda mentioned, not so much the golden rule, but the platinum rule, thinking of them in terms of how they might want to be handled or treated. How we treat ourselves, though, is how we treat our others. Our inability to love ourselves creates violent ripples, and when able to find that love within, hiding or maybe our own mental creations of a sense of failure, we can tend to fix others. Shelley cautioned against this as even when just helping people in general, and only then when they ask 3 times and make sure they're not lying. Ahimsa means we trust with one another to also guide their lives. Even Kriyananda said as a guru, no one knows your mind and state of consciousness better than yourself. Help connotates I'm more skilled at helping somebody else with their life than theirs. And we learn compassion as we dissolve our personal version of the world rather than the eyes, stuck in our own eyes and judgment. Verbal nonviolence arises by cultivating speaking softly, gently, and wisely. Verbal violence manifests in abusive words, insulting statements, angry speech, bad advice. I think many of us have experienced a physical wound, and I've had some rather challenging injuries in my life, but often a verbal wound will take longer to heal than a physical one. Yama and Niyama, of course, are also guided by 4 situations: class, time, place, and circumstance. The example in the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga was to kill a rat would be violent with the bubonic plague, but it could kill thousands. A ruler can incarcerate someone who's a violent criminal. But once again, what would be the larger cause to violence for others? Without the 4 guidelines for application, it would be impossible to live in the world. It would defeat the purpose of the attainment of wisdom. The satya. Intellectual truth is to examine all words with the intent to harm, speaking only which is useful and good. Guideline I was once given was if it's not necessary, beneficial, and worthwhile, don't speak at all. Ultimately, truth, Tat Sat Om, is that you are truth. You are part of life, not apart from it. Partnered with ahimsa, truthfulness keeps nonviolence from becoming a wimpy cop-out, but it also keeps truth from being used as a weapon. There's a continual need to balance and belong, but also a need to grow and self-express. Verbal truth is to benefit only that which benefits all, and the truth does the greatest good for the greatest number of people, keeping one's word. Truth is spoken without thought of loss or gain, and physical truth is verbiage into action, or Kriya. We transform from lies and half-truths to sort of express our own uniqueness with authenticity. The next one, non-stealing, or asteya, pardon my bad Sanskrit, from a spiritual level is what pranic balance and self-sufficiency is all about. Things flow from life, but we should be willing to gather those gifts. When we're engaged in the joy of unfolding ourselves, we automatically serve the world rather than steal from it. This guides our tendency to look outward for satisfaction. Intellectual non-stealing is difficult since we should not even be able to think about what belongs to another person, which is definitely a challenge. When taking what you've not earned, it brings negative karma. When comparing ourselves to others, we either find ourselves lacking or feel superior and arrogant. Verbal stealing means not even wanting to take dignity, pride, happiness, just one's moment of joy or glory, injure one's character, or even their mental values. In encounters with others, do they feel uplifted or as if something is taken from them? Physically, of course, you don't take what's yours. And this jewel helps us focus on what we want and build competency to earn it. And we turn from theft to cultivating new skills, abilities, and states of consciousness. Celibacy or brahmacharya is about the control of all organs, or although it's often presented as non-sensuality. In the Vedic tradition, there's 4 stages of life. First stage is celebrated with celibacy until one decides whether or not they want to be a householder or, again, a solitary life of contemplation. Moving from celibacy to marriage, there's still not an unbridled expression of sensuality, but a focus on having a mind state and creating a state of harmony in the sense of the union where a soul would want to reincarnate. Intellectual celibacy is not brooding over the objects of senses. Although we think of this more as the opposites in sex of sexuality, the opposite sex is to be regarded highly. Kriyananda mentions nothing scatters the pranic force more than lust. And again, he also mentioned that most of it, or craving, is more from the stomach, I think, than he said the sex organs, if I can remember the quote right. It reminds us to take each action with a sense of holiness rather than indulgence. We often move unconsciously to the feelings associated thing rather than the feeling states itself. Walking with the divine, we find excess doesn't own us as much as it used to. We tend to turn to appreciation and pleasure without excess. To gather the life force, hey, do totally what you're doing at the time to remain in the moment, and that helps us. Verbal celibacy implies speech regarding sexual expressions and overtones, and physical celibacy is directing the pranic action to another with great love. It taps into the universe as what is love and touching that we believe we are not. Additionally, it covers not eating spicy food cooked by certain individuals with strong negativity or sensuality. Lastly is non-greed, or apagrapha. And I think I'm going to have to kick it up as far as time. It's the second most important yama to be able to control the life energy. It's detachment from enjoying sense objects, not the objects themselves. And this can lead to violence to others or yourself. It's established in meditation, deliberation, discernments. Once the mind is possessed by objects, it fears losing them, and then the objects then begin to control us rather than not we possessing the objects. Key concept to non-greed is not to feel great elation when something comes your way or great depression if it doesn't. Love was once described to me as love is what's left when you've let go of everything else, or the things you love. Verbal non-greed means not using intriguing, enticing, lucid words. And more subtly, it means being even too talkative or verbally superficial. Physical non-greed means not to reach beyond one's essential needs. It turns us from attachment to intimacy without possession. And we'll move to the niyamas. Purity is not a moral guideline or a saucha, but it's more like an example of water without mud in it. The function of this practice is to cause the pranic energies to ascend through the chakra tree to higher consciousness. Intellectual purity is lifting our thoughts and emotions to a higher state of awareness. It's a great energy line, mostly dormant, expressed in moments of love, deep wisdom, and harmony. Purity is to engage in a cleansing process to prepare for these experiences all the time. It invokes noble thoughts. It's often reached or guided by chanting the symbol Om. Verbal purity is done at the heart chakra, about speaking what is consoling, harmonizing, gentle. Lifting that from the heart to the throat chakra. Purification also takes place by chanting and pranayama, or breath techniques. Physical purity means utilizing mudras. It is both external, keeping the body clean, and also the 6-shot Kriyas, which is a whole class itself. Moving now to, if you will, our niyamas, is number one is contentment. This again dovetails with nonviolence. Contentment is falling in love with your life. Santosha invites us to take a refuge in a calm center and open our hearts to gratitude what we have and practice what paradoxically could be non-seeking. In our society, advertising is a center place of business, which is the key to having us feel we can't live life with something we haven't heard of 30 seconds ago. We are always getting ready to live or pursuing happiness rather than just being joyful. Rather than find peace in the moment, once again, as this dovetails with the idea of nonviolence, we tend to, again, misuse the two great functions of the mind, memory and imagination, playing the game of if only and or what if. Our self-importance can have us spend much of our lives being offended by someone. And it locks in the what if expectation of joy showing up if someone or something shows up to manifest. Kriyananda would often use marriage as an example. That would be a talk in and of itself. Discontent is sort of the illusion that can be something else other than the moment. And nothing else can pull us from contentment, because if we see the eyes of love and wonder. Intellectual contentment means be willing to psychologically part with anything we don't need. And most pursue objects of pleasure and miss the deeper santosha. Verbal contentment means bringing up chatter or superficial contentment. A Zen master said once, I believe his name was Mizumi Roshi. Why don't you die now and enjoy the rest of your life? One of the measures that I found always interesting with that was both the Egyptian and Tibetan Book of Dead measure one's life as if on a feather, and the feather is put, or the mat of truth is put, and you ask to review your life, did you bring joy? But only then could you do that if you experience joy. You can't give something you don't have. Next would be tapas, or austerity. That's a power to withstand discomfort. It's two countercurrents of thought and emotion, and it brings about the removal of attachment, ego, conceit. Then one is able to withdraw into the inner universe. Verbal austerity keeps us from verbal agitation with bitter, harsh words. And Moner, the vow of silence, is often considered austerity of speech. How am I doing here? Here we go. We just got a few more self-study. And that is a look at the ego being the function of the mind that organizes itself in something called I, the ahamkara. When faced with disharmony, our tendency is to blame what's outside of it and justify it. Knowing that we are not our thought, neti, that negates that. Intellectual study would also include chanting, meditation, Om, the Gayatri. Verbal self-study is practiced by reading the holy texts, but ultimately, physical self-study, correct posture, it said, it means examining your life. And then lastly, there's centering on God, or Ishvara, Pranidhana. There's an unmitigated total dedication to all your actions to your Ishta. In choosing an Ishta, which again was part of our practice, Kriyananda always asked us to take a look at what would you be willing to die for in life and live for it. Respectively, it might be love, that would be Krishna or Christ, compassion, the Buddha, perhaps wisdom would be Shiva. But as the ego stops fighting to be number one, life begins to nourish and feed us in amazing ways. And hopefully with skillful action. That's what I've got in a little over 20 minutes. Pardon the overrun. Now comes the fun part. Let's see how it works in our life. Thank you very much.